Excellent. So I'll go ahead and get started as people kind of grab some snacks here. So the story that I'm going to tell to you today is an interesting saga of the collision of two filter bubbles. And my name is David, and the name of the story is the Galactic Numerology collision. And it is a story of these two filter bubbles colliding and bursting and kind of the interesting soapy mimetic poetry that remained. And so in order to tell this story, there's a couple key terms to be aware of. Those is numerology and gematria, the pigeonhole principle, and galactic tick day. So numerology is a kind of old world knowledge, Kabbalan tradition of finding the numerical value of words in a mystic type of way. And so the way that it works with the cipher. And so as you can see here, we're taking the word refactor and essentially translating it into numbers. And you can see there's multiple different types of ciphers in this way of thinking. And this is there's a subculture that uses the fact that words have like numerical values as the rationale for explaining the way the world works. It's kind of a fringe conspiracy group, and let's see, excellent. And the reason that doesn't necessarily hold water as a way to explain the world is because of something called the pigeonhole principle, which of course is when you have 21 pigeons and 20 places for them to roost, you're going to have one pigeonhole that doubles up. This also explains what people call the birthday problem. If you have 23 people in a room, there's a 50% chance that you're going to have a pair that has similar birthdays. And a way to think about this intuitively, it's because you're not comparing one person versus everybody in the room, but you're individually comparing the pairs. So it makes sense that you would have the coincidence or the things mapping up. And the final term to define is galactic tick day. Has anybody in the room heard of this before, come across this? Okay, more work to do. So this is a project that I've been working on with some friends for a few years. We created a holiday that celebrates the motion of the solar system around the Milky Way galaxy. And there's kind of interesting math about how we got there. And we made videos and all kinds of great stuff. And so this was, the first one happened in September of 2016. And really the whole idea behind doing this was kind of to create an avenue to talk about our obvious apparent togetherness on our home planet. And so we celebrated this first Galactic Tick Day, which again was kind of a kooky, weirdo project that was a lot of fun, September 2016. And we had decent media success. It was really interesting talking to the journalists about this. It really felt like, we're in space all the time, but that is not necessarily new news on any given day, so there wasn't really any scaffolding to tell that story with. And all of a sudden, this was an outlet to talk about the awesomeness of being in a solar system and the sun being in motion. And that was really, really cool. And we threw a weird, nerdy party in San Francisco. I guess the notion of trying to make a new holiday is you have to establish the traditions associated with it. So far, we've been having science talks and funkadelic music. And then everything was well and good. It was really exciting. And then something really interesting popped up. I saw this this video on YouTube, and there's some interesting kind of AV things going on here. So what I'm going to do is just pause this, and I should be able to play the video so you can hear the audio from my phone. I'll play you the first 50 seconds from this video. See if this works. I have to do that as well. Hold on.
As we know it, is mostly contrived bullshit meant to deceive us
So when I first heard that, I was like, this is a total joke. And in retrospect, I realized that the periphery of my own filter bubble was made out of parody. When I see something that I don't think could be real, I'm like, oh, that's a total joke. But then upon watching it a second time, it was like, okay, there's something really interesting going on here. And so what I did is, this guy's name is Zach. He had 30,000 YouTube subscribers at the time. I commented on the video. I said, hey, I'm the guy from the thing that you're talking about. Let's have a conversation. It would be cool to meet. So we had this really interesting conversation. We obviously had some fundamental worldview disagreements and around like the importance and meaning of and the significance of various coincidences. But it was a very kind of cordial conversation. It was a private dialogue. It didn't happen in any kind of public context. And there was an interesting quote from Zach, which I'll read to you now. He said, quote, "The American people are coincidence theorists. They think everything is a coincidence. It's a word that's programmed into the consciousness to explain the way the world works." Pretty interesting view. So then one galactic tick, which is roughly 1.7 years, passes, and the next galactic tick day occurs. Zach and I had kind of like a slight nemesis-like relationship where we would chat each other on Skype maybe once every few months, and he would say, could that be a coincidence? I would say, yes. What else could it be? Things like that. And again, it was an awesome success. We had 22,000 upvotes on our space on Reddit, which equated to like 500,000 impressions. We threw another weird party in San Francisco. That was super fun. Come to the next one, March 21st, 2020. And I messaged Zach. I said, hey, Zach, let's have another conversation. See what's going on here. And he was kind enough to invite me onto his podcast. And so his podcast is called The Gematria Effect, and it's on Truth Frequency Radio. And he claims that this episode features the longest public debate anywhere about the relevance of gematria. Listen in and decide for yourself. And so I'll just play you a couple clips from that episode. I've got here my phone. So just to set some context, basically, we had a lot of conversation around like the meaning of coincidence and was there meaning of these things, and I was trying to dive into why this was significant. So I'll go ahead and play this here. This is me. That's Zach. And so he goes on and on for a little bit. Oh, oh yeah. Oh, shoot, hold on.
Yeah. I don't mean to be rude and cut you off. I just want to make sure we're addressing the point. So, like,
hold on.
as I reviewed your initial
Sorry.
video, all the numbers that...
Yeah, and so basically we're talking for an hour and a half, and the podcast was public, and I was admittedly being like quite aggressive in directly attacking the foundation of his worldview, saying like, hey, are you sure you're just like not taking this worldview on because it's more comfortable to live in a world where there's kind of puppet masters behind the scenes, rather than just like hanging out in the undulating, unfolding, random chaos of reality? And he was not really happy about this, and I was really pushing his buttons, and I'll play you one more clip that is kind of intense. Just, let's see. Here we go. Oh, and this is a caller calling in afterwards. Oh, this is him.
when things are so out of shape and you have people like this treating you this way,
Let's talk about me.
you're in the right. There's a reason we were given the ability to fight and kill, and there's a reason life is delicate. You know, some of it does need to be wiped away very quickly. We live in a time, and a lot of people might not agree with this, but it needs to happen. We live in a society, a cesspool of horrible people, horrible values. I get sick of listening to people say, "Oh, I think people are good." People, you know what? People are probably born good, but they're corrupt in this world, and they don't try to fight against it. And for all the people who don't fight against it, they become part of it, and they become part of the tyranny, and they become part of the evil.
So yeah, that was pretty intense, and that scared me. And basically, I had no communication after that. He sent me like one more very rude text message, and then I decided never to contact him again. So we'll see if he sees this video. And now here's an interesting thing about how to end this talk on a positive note. I'll go ahead and maybe talk about some kind of interesting observations that happened throughout this process. I've been calling what I call the co-opting awe gambit, and it's what Zach is doing with numerology, and you also see it with other cults and conspiracy theorists, and it works like this. Basically, you explain the world in some kind of novel or deconstructed way that has a bunch of legitimate, interesting insights, like have you ever considered that school is like sitting in rows and receiving information from the government, or finances like X, Y, and Z, or all of these words have the same numerical value? How amazing is that? And while there's this kind of like bubble of awe, wow, I've never really thought about that. That's so interesting. A new worldview is kind of slipped in. This illegitimate information is slipped in when there's no sound argument to make it. But it's an interesting pattern if you kind of look at cults and conspiracies and stuff, to see if you can spot this move of co-opting interesting things happening. And then another thing that I think is really interesting that about this process is the depth of this gematria lens. I think the reason that it feels really hard to break is that it is, I think in Zach's view, exposing the fact that like there is this secret Jewish Illuminati Freemason rulers, and then that the fact that the lens, the Kabbalah, or excuse me, the gematria lens comes from the Kabbalah also has like this Hebrew association with it. It creates this reinforcing loop where I'm like using the lens and then seeing that the people who created the lens are actually behind everything. And I think in that way it becomes really, really tough to break. And then just kind of interfacing with these other filter bubbles from the ones that I'm in, some really interesting common ground that's come up is there's a really deep desire for learning in a lot of these communities, as I would say we have in this community, if we can call it that. One way that gets a little bit weird is you often see in conspiracy groups, people go, you have to check this out, I have 700 pages on this, or I have a 4-hour video, where the length and the quantity of the evidence is substituted for the quality. The other thing is that in these communities, it's incredibly kind of like friendly and generous and heart-centered, and there's this real big thing of like, I absolutely have to deliver this knowledge to you. It's like super, super imperative. And that's super lovely. And then finally, when I get into these conversations with people who I would say are like in colliding filter bubble contexts, the notion of constructed realities does come up. In the conspiracy context, there's the notion of the constructed reality of the financial system or the government system. And then in my worldview, there's this constructed reality of like moment waking to reality in our sensation-based or phenomenological world model that consists of our brain and our mind, etc. And it's really interesting, and there's some kind of gooey conversations that come out of drawing parallels between those notions of constructed realities. And with that, I'll just kind of pose a discussion question to ponder, which is, what are the possible means that leverage the common ground between these filter bubbles to advocate for comprehensive thinking and setting big picture contexts? And of course, the reason that is important is because here we are all together. Thank you for your time.